Hello, and welcome to the Fair Housing Accessibility First training curriculum on FHA Requirement 7 Usable Kitchens. This training is approximately 1.5 hours in length. So we'll start with a discussion of the GoToWebinar platform, the viewing screen. Under the GoToWebinar platform, you will find several dashboard items. This includes the viewing screen. You will see at the top, it will state whose screen you are viewing and will allow you to zoom in or screenshot the items you see on the screen. The webcam function should be disabled. The GoToWebinar dashboard and control panel. You can set up the dashboard to include the screen that is being shared and the GoToWebinar control panel, or you can move the control panel to another window if you have multiple screens. The GoToWebinar control panel. The GoToWebinar control panel is where you will control your audio, review any attached handouts, and ask any questions. Today we have 3 handouts in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel. These handouts include the Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines, the Fair Housing Act Design Manual, and the Participant Workbook. GoToWebinar knowledge check questions. During the webinar, we will be conducting knowledge checks. The GoToWebinar platform calls these quick polls. When we launch the polls, they will automatically appear. To select your answer, click the circle next to the answer and hit submit at the bottom. GoToWebinar certificates. For attending at least 45 minutes of today's presentation, you will receive an attendance certificate. If you attend for less than 45 minutes, you will not receive an attendance certificate. The attendance certificate will be sent to you on Wednesday. If you take the final quiz, which will be available at the end of today's presentation, and pass the quiz, you will receive a passing certificate. The final quiz was in the reminder emails and will be in the email that comes to participants 2 hours after the end of the webinar. You may take the quiz anytime following this training. Passing certificates will immediately be issued for a score of 80% or higher. Okay, so now let's talk about the agenda, topics, and learning objectives. Today's agenda includes an introduction, topics, and learning objectives to help you understand FHA Requirement 7 usable kitchens. During this session, we will cover the following topics and learning objectives. The Terminal Learning Objective, or TLO, is to identify the design and construction guidance provided for FHA Requirement 7 usable kitchens within the accessibility guidelines and the Fair Housing Act Design Manual. The topics and enabling learning objectives, or ELOs, are as follows. Topic 1, Fair Housing Act Overview. ELO, identify the history and protections of the Fair Housing Act, also known as the FHA. Topic 2, Usable Kitchens. ELO, recognize the general specifications provided to guide the design and construction of FHA compliant kitchens. Topic 3, clear floor space, or CFS, at ranges, cooktops, and sinks. ELO, identify the approaches and CFS required for appliances commonly found in usable kitchens. Topic 4, CFS at ovens, dishwashers, refrigerators, freezers, and trash compactors. ELO, identify the approaches and CFS required for appliances commonly found in usable kitchens. Topic 5, clearance between opposing elements. ELO, identify the required clearance between opposing appliances, cabinets, and walls in usable kitchens. Topic 6, U-shaped kitchens. ELO, identify the technical specifications for U-shaped kitchens. Topic 7, pantries. ELO, identify the requirements and recommendations for storage pantries in usable kitchens. Topic 8, increased accessibility. ELO, recognize methods to increase the usability of FHA compliant kitchens. And once we wrap topic 8, we'll move into our live Q&A session. We'll have our knowledge check review, and then we will close so you can take your final quiz. I see that I have a caption notification, so let me take a pause and see if I can correct this issue. Give me a okay. All right, it looks like we are back in the swing of things. And as a note, this training relies on the provisions of the Fair Housing Act and its regulations, the Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines, the American National Standards Institute, also known as ANSI, the A117.1 1986 standard, and the Fair Housing Act Design Manual for the guidance it provides about compliance with the technical design and construction requirements in the Act. Our presenters today include Mr. Eric Contreras and myself, Crystal Nolan. Mr. Contreras has 20 years of experience performing accessibility consulting services, Americans with Disability Act compliance evaluations, implementation plan development, ADA corporate policy guidance and interpretation, and ADA compliance reviews. During the live Q&A session, Mr. Contreras will answer your questions, which you can type in the questions pod. And I'm Crystal Nolan. I've worked in education, media, and advocacy for over 20 years, and I am pleased to assist with today's training. Now, our technical support today will be provided by Miss Corey Nolan, Miss Alexia Brown, and Mr. Michael Dyson. Ms. Liz Dyson will organize your questions for the Q&A portion of today's presentation. The Fair Housing Accessibility First program provides a design and construction resource center, also known as the DCRC, which is staffed Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern. The DCRC provides comprehensive and detailed instructions, helpful online web resources, and an information line for technical guidance and support. You can reach the DCRC toll free at 888 341 7781. And that number is voice and teletype accessible. Or you can reach the DCRC by emailing fairhousingfirst@hud.gov. And please remember to subscribe via the website for updates from the Fair Housing Accessibility First program. And with that, we're going to move into our very first topic, Fair Housing or FHA overview. And let's talk about the Fair Housing Act or FHA protections. More than 50 years ago, Congress passed the Fair Housing Act as part of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, prohibiting housing discrimination based on color, national origin, race, religion, and sex. Persistent public demand led to the 1988 amendment, which extended housing discrimination protections to include disability. This change ensured equal access to housing for people with disabilities, their households, and those associated with them. The amendment underscored the importance of disability rights and reflected the public's tenacity in demanding legal changes to protect vulnerable populations. For more information about the protections of the FHA, please scan this QR code or visit HUD's website. And moving right along, FHA safe harbors. A safe harbor is an objective code, guideline, or standard that building professionals can follow to ensure that multifamily developments are inclusive for everyone, including people with disabilities. The FHA ensures that homes and apartments are accessible. It does not mandate a single standard that states exactly how to build them. Instead, designers and builders must choose one of 15 safe harbors approved by HUD. If a safe harbor is followed without deviation, compliance is ensured. For a list of HUD-approved safe harbors, scan this QR code or visit the Frequently Asked Questions page on HUD's website. Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines. The FHA's mission is accomplished through the 7 requirements of the Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines, better known as simply the guidelines. Think of this set of rules as a recipe for creating accessible homes. This recipe applies to all new multifamily buildings with 4 or more dwelling units built for occupancy after March 13, 1991. The design and construction specifications in the guidelines identify minimal accessibility requirements. Architects, designers, and builders are encouraged to exceed these standards, increasing inclusivity, safety, and marketability. Today's training focuses on Requirement 7 and examines the sections related to usable kitchens. And that brings us to Knowledge Check 1. And I'm going to this poll so that you can select the correct answer. Okay, so Knowledge Check 1 reads, the FHA applies to all new multifamily buildings with 4 or more dwelling units built for occupancy after March 13, 1991. Is that statement true or false? And I see those answers are coming in swiftly. Okay, wonderful. It looks like everyone has voted. And so now I will close this poll. And let's review our topic 1, key takeaways. The 1988 F extended housing discrimination protections to include disability. There are 15 HUD-approved safe harbors. The 7 requirements of the guidelines apply to all new multifamily buildings with 4 or more dwelling units built for occupancy after March 13, 1991. Okay, and now topic 2, FHA Requirement 7, usable kitchens. Usable kitchens. FHA Requirement 7 specifies that a 30 by 48-inch clear floor space, also known as CFS, be provided at each kitchen appliance or fixture, and that each CFS adjoin the accessible route that must pass into and through the kitchen. CFS for fixtures and appliances may overlap. In any conventional kitchen plan, Overlapping the minimum 36-inch wide accessible route with the clear floor spaces at all fixtures and appliances is anticipated to provide the necessary maneuvering space for a person using a mobility aid to approach and then position themselves close enough to use the fixture safely. Designers and builders utilize FHA Requirement 7 to produce usable kitchens with specific minimum CFS requirements for fixtures and appliances, minimum clearance measurements between counters, and additional specifications for U-shaped kitchens. Usable kitchens are not necessarily accessible kitchens. However, usable kitchens must meet other applicable requirements, including having usable doors and having outlets and switches in usable locations. Wheelchair turning spaces. The wheelchair turning spaces described in most national accessibility standards are not required in kitchens that meet the guidelines, except in most U-shaped kitchens. According to most national standards of accessibility, a majority of U-shaped kitchens will need clearance for a minimum 60-inch circular turning space. Guideline specifications for usable kitchens. For usable kitchens, the guidelines specify that counters may be at the standard height of 36 inches. Kitchens and covered units must be on an accessible route and have passage door openings with at least 32-inch clearance. There must be adequate space within the kitchen to provide a 30 by 48-inch clear floor space at each fixture and appliance. At least 40 inches of clearance must be provided between all opposing base cabinets, countertops, appliances, and walls. CFS and approaches. Primarily, two types of approaches are used with the 30 by 48-inch clear floor space required to accommodate a single wheelchair and occupant. The first is the parallel approach or side approach. With this approach, the user is parallel to the appliance, which is at the side of the wheelchair. The second is the forward approach or perpendicular approach. Using this approach, the wheelchair user is in front or perpendicular to the appliance. Note that it is essential to check the selected safe harbor for its specific measurement. The clear floor space must be centered on the appliance or fixture. In other words, its center line must be aligned with the center line of the fixture or the appliance. This centered position is most critical at corners where an appliance may have to be pulled away from the corner to allow a full centered approach. And now we have arrived at our second knowledge check. And so I'm going to launch this poll. All right. Knowledge check 2 reads, the two approaches used with the CFS in usable kitchens are the parallel approach and the perpendicular approach. Is that true or is that false? And we'll give some few seconds. And it looks like everyone has voted. And so I will close this poll and we will review topic 2, key takeaways. FHA Requirement 7 specifies that a 30 by 48-inch clear floor space, or CFS, be provided at each kitchen appliance or fixture, and that each CFS adjoin the accessible route that must pass into and through the kitchen. For usable kitchens, the guidelines specify that counters may be at the standard height of 36 inches. Kitchens and covered units must be on an accessible route and have passage door openings with at least 32-inch clearance. And a clearance of at least 40 inches must be provided between all opposing base cabinets, countertops, appliances, and walls. With the 30 by 48-inch clear floor space of usable kitchens, there are two primary approaches: the parallel approach and the perpendicular approach. Most U-shaped kitchens will need clearance for a minimum 60-inch circular turning space. All right, and we're moving right along to topic 3, CFS at ranges, cooktops, and sinks. Space to execute a parallel approach must be provided at ranges, cooktops, and sinks unless knee space is provided. The CFS in this parallel orientation allows the wheelchair user to make a close side approach, permitting safer and easier reach to controls and cooking surfaces. Ranges and cooktops, a parallel approach. The parallel approach requires a wheelchair to be positioned beside a wall, element, or surface to the side with a CFS of 48 inches long and 30 inches wide. Where the CFS is positioned for a parallel approach, it must be centered on the appliance. And you can see that demonstrated in the diagram on your screen. Ranges and cooktops, forward approach. The forward approach requires that a wheelchair face a wall, element, or surface with a CFS of 30 inches wide by 48 inches deep. Where the CFS is positioned for a forward approach, it shall be centered on the appliance. Ranges and cooktops. Caution. A forward approach can be difficult and unsafe, especially when controls are located at the back of the appliance. It requires seated users to lean forward over their feet and knees to reach hot pots, pans, and controls, which can be dangerous. CFS at ranges and cooktops not centered. If the 30 by 48 inch CFS is not centered, a person attempting a side approach will not have a full range of motion for side reach tasks. As you can see on your screen, when the CFS is not centered, the person is leaning excessively over the stove, which creates a potential risk or injury or harm, and this is not allowed under the guidelines. Sinks. Parallel approach. The parallel CFS at sinks must be centered on the bowl so a user can reach down into the bowl to use it. At single bowl sinks, the center line of the CFS must align with the center line of the bowl. Where there are multiple bowl sinks, the CFS must be centered on the overall sink itself. The CFS in parallel and centered orientation allows a person using a wheelchair to make a close side approach, permitting a reach to the faucets to easily wash dishes or food without excessive twisting in a wheelchair. Now, sinks with the forward approach. A sink may also be designed with knee space below, with the 30 by 48 inch CFS oriented for a forward approach. Faucets. Faucets are typically placed at the center of or within 6 inches of the center of the sink, regardless of the number of basins. Since the CFS is centered on the sink, users can access the faucet controls. And that brings us to Knowledge Check 3. And Knowledge Check 3 reads, space to execute a parallel approach must be provided at ranges, cooktops, and sinks unless blank space is provided. And your first answer choice is knee, second answer choice is storage, and third is turning. Okay, and I'm going to close this poll. Everyone has voted, and that brings us to our review of topic 3. Space to execute a parallel approach must be provided at ranges, cooktops, and sinks unless knee space is provided. The CF to a range, cooktop, or sink must be centered on the appliance. At single bowl sinks, the center line of the CFS must align with the center line of the bowl. Where there are multiple bowl sinks, the CFS must be centered on the overall sink itself. Faucets are typically placed at the center of or within 6 inches of the center of the sink, regardless of the number of basins. All right, topic 4, clear floor space at ovens, dishwashers, refrigerators, freezers, and trash compactors. Ovens, dishwashers, refrigerators, freezers, and trash compactors must also provide either a parallel or perpendicular approach with a CFS of 30 to 48 inches adjacent to the appliance. Even though this group of appliances has operable doors that require the user to be able to get out of the way of the door swing, for purposes of design and room layout, the CFS must be centered on the appliance itself. Next, let's talk about ovens in ranges. So, ovens in ranges must have a parallel or perpendicular CFS adjacent to the appliance. The illustration on your screen shows how an oven's functional use could be based on a forward or a parallel approach to the oven racks. And you can see on the screen, the person is seated in the wheelchair. They can access those racks by pulling up parallel to that oven door, or they can pull up with a forward approach to the oven where their feet are actually under the oven door, and then they can access those oven racks that way as well. Okay, so now let's talk about wall ovens. Wall-mounted and microwave ovens must also have either a parallel or a forward CFS adjacent to the appliance. When a single wall-mounted oven is installed, it is recommended that the bottom of the oven be mounted at 36 inches maximum from the floor or near counter height so a seated user can reach over a hot door and at minimum pull out the bottom oven rack. Controls should be mounted within the recommended reach of a seated user at 54 inches maximum from the floor. If double ovens are installed, a wheelchair user must be able to execute a parallel or forward approach to the appliance. At least one oven interior and its controls, even though appliance controls are not covered by the guidelines, at least one of those oven interiors and controls should be within the reach range of a seated person. Okay, now let's move along, and we're going to talk about refrigerators and freezers. CFS for at least one type of approach either forward or parallel, must be centered on refrigerators and freezers. Now, this applies to side-by-side models and over-under models. And here we are, knowledge check 4. I'm going to launch this poll so that you can select the correct answer. And knowledge check 4 reads, it is recommended that the controls of at least one wall-mounted oven should be within the reach range of a seated person. Is this true or is this false? Okay. Everyone has voted, and so we'll close this poll and let's review topic 4. Ovens, dishwashers, refrigerators, freezers, and trash compactors must provide either a parallel or perpendicular approach to the CFS of 30 inches by 48 inches adjacent to the appliance. When a single wall-mounted oven is installed, it is recommended that the bottom of the oven be mounted at a maximum height of 36 inches from the floor or near counter height. Oven controls should be mounted within the recommended reach of a seated user at 54 inches maximum height from the floor. And we're going to talk about clearance between opposing elements. The guidelines require a clearance of at least 40 inches between all opposing base cabinets, countertops, appliances, and walls. The 40-inch clearance is measured from any countertop or the face of any appliance, excluding handles and controls, that projects into the kitchen to the opposing cabinet, countertop, appliance, or wall. The minimum clearance between a range and an opposing base cabinet is shown here. The dimensions must be measured from the front face of the range to the countertop edge, and that is excluding cabinet handles and appliance handles. Remember that. Very important. Those handles, either for cabinets and appliances, are not included in that 40-inch clearance. Clearance between counters and refrigerators. Refrigerators vary significantly in depth, and they may extend up to 8 inches beyond cabinet faces. Standard freestanding and drop-in ranges may project up to 3 inches. Appliance depths, excluding door handles, must be included when calculating the 40-inch clearances. The minimum clearance between the refrigerator and the opposing base cabinet is shown here. And you can see in the diagram on your screen how far that refrigerator extends out past that cabinet, that wall hung cabinet. But nevertheless, you still have to make sure that that 40-inch minimum clearance is there between that opposing base cabinet. And let's talk about narrow kitchens now. In a narrow, usable kitchen, the 40-inch minimum clearance provides an additional 5 inches on either side of the required CFS of 30 by 48 inches at each fixture or appliance. So a user in a wheelchair can maneuver as close as possible to appliances or fixtures. A narrow kitchen, such as the one shown, meets the guidelines and is usable, but it may be difficult for many people using wheelchairs. Its narrow corridor design requires a user in a wheelchair to exit the kitchen to turn around. The illustration on your screen shows a 40-inch minimum clearance between all counters, base cabinets, appliances, and walls. Usable kitchen designs with islands. In more elaborate kitchens where an island is planned, a 40-inch clearance must be maintained between the face of the island and all the opposing features. Even though an accessible route for a 90-degree turnaround and obstruction is 36 inches to ensure sufficient space for maneuvering within a usable kitchen, the minimum clearance of 40 inches must be maintained. And now we are at knowledge check 5, and I'm going to launch this poll so that you can select the correct answer. And knowledge check 5 reads, appliance depths, excluding door handles, must be included when calculating the 40-inch clearances. Is that true or is that false? Okay. Wonderful. Everyone has submitted their selection, and we're going to move ahead to topic 5, key takeaways. The guidelines require a clearance of at least 40 inches between all opposing base cabinets, countertops, appliances, and walls. Appliance depths, excluding door handles, must be included when calculating the 40-inch clearances. And our next topic is U-shaped kitchens. And specifically, we're going to talk about the 60-inch diameter turning circle. A 60-inch diameter turning circle is required in a U-shaped kitchen with a sink, range, or cooktop at its base. This turning diameter provides adequate maneuvering space for a person using a wheelchair to approach and position themselves parallel to the appliance or fixture at the base of the U. Any appliances, such as refrigerators and ranges, excluding door handles, that project beyond countertops and cabinets, must not encroach on this 60-inch diameter turning space. In addition to the turning space, the kitchen must be arranged so there is a 30 by 48-inch CFS for a parallel approach centered on the sink, range, or cooktop. The illustration on your screen shows a 60-inch diameter turning circle when a range is located at the bottom of a U-shaped kitchen. Notice the turning space is aligned with the center line of the range and the clear floor space. Sinks and dishwashers. When a single basin sink is at the bottom of the U and a dishwashing machine is planned to be included adjacent to it, the distance between the legs of the U must be greater than 60 inches to allow a centered approach to the sink. This illustration shows that the room width increases to a minimum of 64 inches. For a parallel approach, there is a 60-inch diameter circle and a 30 by 48-inch CFS. The 64-inch clearance between opposing elements ensures that the refrigerator does not encroach upon the 60-inch diameter turning circle or the clear floor space at the sink. This is sometimes required, This sometimes requires the dishwasher to be located closer to the sink, increasing the distance between the legs of the U. In the diagram shown, the refrigerator is pulled away from the sink and beyond the turning circle, as a refrigerator may not overlap the 5-foot turning space. If there were a double basin sink, this dimension would need to be increased if it is wider than 30 inches. And that brings us to our next two knowledge checks. And knowledge check 6 reads, a blank diameter turning circle is in a U-shaped kitchen with a sink, range, or cooktop at its base. Your first answer selection is 30 inches. The second selection is 60 inches. And the third selection is 90 inches. All right. And the selections have been made. I can close this poll and we'll advance to knowledge check 7. And I'll launch this poll. And knowledge check 7 reads, a U-shaped kitchen must be arranged so there is a 30-inch by 48-inch CFS for a parallel approach centered on the sink, range, or cooktop. Is that true or is that false? All right, and all of those answers are in. Dishwashers, dishwasher access. To reduce the need for additional floor space, and because CFS at appliances and fixtures may overlap, the clear floor space at the sink can serve as the clear floor space for a forward approach to dishwasher racks when they are pulled out of the dishwasher. Even though the dishwasher door would rest on the user's feet, the required CFSs are provided, and the kitchen complies with the guidelines maneuvering requirements. Exceptions, removable base cabinets. The guidelines permit U-shaped kitchens with a sink or cooktop at the base of the U to have less than 60 inches between the legs of the U, only when removable base cabinets are provided under the cooktop or sink. Clearance of at least 40 inches is still required. Since knee space cannot be provided Below a range, kitchens with a range at the base of the U must have the 60-inch minimum turning diameter. If a base cabinet is removed, the resulting knee space allows a person using a wheelchair to pull up under the feature to reach controls and perform cooking and cleaning functions. Although not required, if a cooktop is provided with knee space below, it is suggested that it be placed in lowered or adjustable height counter segments so it can be used easily and safely by people using wheelchairs. The illustration on your screen shows a cooktop at the base of a narrow U-shaped kitchen where a range is typically not allowed except when there is knee space. Removable cabinets. Narrow U-shaped kitchens where knee space must be provided below sinks or cooktops can appear identical to those that lack this additional feature, since knee space can be concealed by a removable or otherwise adaptable base cabinet. This can be beneficial when a potential resident or owner needs knee space, since it can be provided quickly and easily. Multiple options for removable cabinets that comply with the required knee spaces at sinks or cooktops in narrow U-shaped kitchens are available. The guidelines require that the floor, walls, and cabinet faces of knee space be finished during initial construction, so no other work is necessary when the base cabinet is removed. Now, considerations. The methods for providing removable cabinets presented in the FHA design manual offer some possible solutions. These include a removable cabinet front, a cabinet with a removable front and bottom, and a fully removable cabinet. The removable cabinet has a cutaway back and a frame that is reinforced with gussets. Based on current manufacturing processes, the removable cabinet front is likely to be the easiest to achieve. However, the resident may need to reinstall the cabinet later. Therefore, storage should be considered. It is recommended that instructions regarding proper storage and reinstallation instructions are taped to the inside of the cabinet. Adaptable base cabinets, self-storing hardware. The use of swinging retractable cabinet door hardware provides another excellent method to conceal knee space because the doors are self-storing and no part of the cabinet has to be removed or stored at another location. A special combination hinge allows the doors to swing open in a traditional manner and, when desired, allows the doors to be pushed back into the cabinet. Knee space and pipe protection. Where knee spaces, are provided below sinks and cooktops, It is strongly recommended that seated users be protected from burns and abrasions. While the guidelines do not specify such protection, the two most common accessibility design standards, the ANSI, ANSI A117.1 1986 and UFAS, UFAS, require the bottoms of cooktops, sink supply lines, and drain pipes to be insulated or enclosed. Again, those two standards require it. With the guidelines, pipe protection is a recommendation. Now, many people who use wheelchairs or scooters have limited sensation in their legs and cannot feel that they are touching a hot pipe or sharp edge, and may be unaware that a severe injury has occurred. Pipes at sinks may be wrapped with insulation, but the insulation must be removed and reinstalled each time the plumbing is serviced. If the pipes are rewrapped using the original insulation, which may have lost much of its adhesion, the resulting application is often ineffective, or sometimes the insulation may be left off entirely. A more aesthetic and practical pipe protection method is installing a removable panel over the plumbing. Pipe cover panels shield the seated user and hides the plumbing from view. If such a panel is installed, it should not inhibit access by encroaching upon the knee space. The panel should be hinged or otherwise removable so the pipes can be easily serviced. Shown here is the knee space at a sink with a pipe protection panel. While a rear located drain is not required for this kind of sink, it is a distinct advantage when creating a usable. Shown here is the knee space at a sink with wrapped pipes. Although wrapped insulation is acceptable under the guidelines, the user must be sure that after a plumbing service that the wrap does adhere or is re-wrapped around those pipes. Shown here is the knee space at a sink with a garbage disposal and pipe protection panel. In this case, a rear drain is preferred, and the adjacent cabinets, walls, and floor must be finished to match. The dimensions for the knee space must be a minimum of 30 inches wide and should be a minimum of 27 inches high under sinks or cooktops located at the base of the U when it is less than 60 inches wide. The 30 by 48 inch CFS must not extend more than 19 inches into the knee space. The illustration on your screen shows the required knee space and CFS in a narrow U-shaped kitchen. And now we have arrived at knowledge check 8. So I will launch this poll. Under the FHA It is blank that the bottoms of cooktops, sink supply lines, and drain pipes be insulated or enclosed. You have two answer choices. The first is recommended. The second is required. Okay. It appears that everyone has selected. Oh, someone changed their answer and they changed it to the right answer, so that's fantastic. Okay. And I'll close this poll. And now let's review topic 6, key takeaways. A 60-inch diameter turning circle is required in a U-shaped kitchen with a sink, range, or cooktop at its base. A U-shaped kitchen must be arranged for a 30 by 48-inch CFS for a parallel approach centered on the sink, range, or cooktop. Where knee spaces are provided below sinks and cooktops, it is strongly recommended that seated users be protected from burns and abrasions, and that the bottoms of cooktops, sink supply lines, and drain pipes be insulated or enclosed. And now we will deal with topic 7, pantries. And first we'll talk about shallow pantries. Shallow storage closets, such as pantries, may have doors that do not provide a 32-inch clear width, since they do not require the user to pass through the door to reach the contents. The guidelines do not address shelving. However, it is recommended that it be provided at various levels. Walk-in pantries. At walk-in pantries that must be entered to reach the stored items, the doorway must provide a 32-inch nominal clear opening. In a small walk-in pantry, if wheelchair users enter the pantry facing the contents, they must back out of the space. In a larger walk-in pantry, if the first shelf is placed 2 feet above the floor, a wheelchair user could turn around in the pantry and exit facing out. A pantry door could swing into or out of the pantry. However, doors that swing in obstruct access to the storage behind the door. And now we've arrived at knowledge check 9. Knowledge check 9 reads, Stefan is designing a walk-in pantry that must be entered to reach the stored items. He should design for a doorway that provides a blank, clear opening, a 30-inch, a 32 nominal inch, or 36-inch. Okay, and everyone has submitted their vote. So we'll close this poll and we will review topic 7. Shallow storage closets, such as pantries, may have doors that do not provide a 32-inch clear width, since they do not require the user to pass through the door to reach the contents. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back. Okay, moving along too fast. Okay, and the second key takeaway is at walk-in pantries that must be entered to reach the stored items, the doorway must provide a 32-inch nominal clear opening. And now I will advance the slide and we will talk about increased accessibility. Laundry appliances. It is important to check the most recent safe harbors for compliance concerning laundry equipment located within kitchens. The guidelines do not require washers and dryers in individual dwelling units to be accessible, which also means that they are not required to have 30 by 48-inch parallel clear floor spaces positioned in front of them. However, when located in the kitchen along a row containing other appliances, it is recommended that space be provided for a parallel approach to each machine. The guidelines permit the installation of stacked washers and dryers. It is recommended that the controls be within the reach of seated users. If the washer and dryer are located behind doors or in a separate utility room, clear floor spaces in front of the machines are not required, but front-loading washing machines are preferred. If a door to a laundry room is intended for passage, the door must provide 32 inches nominal clear opening. When laundry equipment is located in a common use area, it must conform to the requirements for accessible public and common use facilities. The CFS can be obstructed by doors, but removing doors may improve access. Appliances should be positioned close to the front of a closet if possible. Other appliances and fixtures. While not required by the guidelines, careful consideration should be given to the selection of appliances and fixtures installed in usable kitchens, so residents who may currently or in the future have a physical limitation may more completely use and enjoy their dwelling. A partial list of additional accessibility considerations for kitchens includes ranges and cooktops with controls that are front or side mounted and have click stops to indicate heat settings, vent hoods with controls mounted at or near countertop level, shallow sink basins with rear-mounted drains when removable base cabinets are provided, lever or blade type handle faucets and controls, and revolving or extending semicircular shelves for corner base cabinet storage. And that brings us to our final knowledge check. Knowledge check 10 reads, the guidelines blank the installation of stacked washers and dryers. The first answer choice is permit, and the second answer choice is do not permit. Okay, it looks like everyone has voted. So I'm going to close this poll. And now let's review topic 8 key takeaways. When laundry equipment is located in a kitchen along a row containing other appliances, it is recommended that space be provided for a parallel approach to each machine. The guidelines permit the installation of stacked washers and dryers, and it is recommended controls be within the reach of seated users. If the washer and dryer are located behind doors or in a separate utility room, clear floor spaces in front of the machines are not required, but front-loading washing machines are preferred. If a door to a laundry room is intended for passage, the door must provide a 32-inch nominal clear opening. And certainly, last but not least, careful consideration should be given to the selection of appliances and fixtures for usable kitchens. At this time, we will move to the questions that have come in during today's training event. And let's see what we have. Okay. All right. Mr. Contreras, there is a question from April. April would like to know, how does CFS apply for amenity areas appliances that are public use?
Thank you for that, Crystal. The Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines require that public use and common use areas be accessible for persons with disabilities. The appliances and fixtures in common use and public use kitchens must also provide a 30-inch by 48-inch clear floor space for parallel or forwarded approach, as that required for appliances and fixtures inside of covered dwelling units.
Thank you for that answer. Our next question is from Tammy, and she would like to know, can a mobile cart or island be used for the required work surface, or does the work surface need to be fixed and or have an accessible outlet?
It is important to emphasize that the Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines do not require work surfaces in kitchens of covered dwelling units. The Fair Housing Accessibility First program provides guidance for compliance with the Fair Housing Act. Other accessibility standards, such as the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Uniform Federal Accessibility Standards, require work surfaces inside of units designed with mobility features. And these guidelines generally cover fixed or built-in items. So it is best that the work surface be fixed or built in. But for further guidance, please reach out to the Access Board.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that answer, Eric. Our next question comes from Nelson. For condominium homeowners, for remodeling, is a usable kitchen required to be maintained?
Alterations to covered dwelling units and common use and public use spaces cannot diminish compliance with the Fair Housing Act. If the unit is covered by the Fair Housing Act and it is going to be remodeled, it cannot be brought out of compliance.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Our next question comes from Eric. Can the clear floor space for a parallel approach to one fixture be allowed to use the knee and under a counter for forward approach to a workspace or sink, even if a removable cabinet is provided for the sink or work surface? So day one, a parallel approach would not be provided until the sink or work surface cabinet is removed.
So yes, the Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines require that the 30-inch by 48-inch clear floor space be provided for a parallel approach that is centered on the fixture. If the space cannot be provided for parallel approach, the guidelines allow providing clear floor space for forward approach by providing knee space under the lavatory that is 30 inches wide and 27 inches high. A removable sink cabinet is an alternative that can be installed and, if needed, removed by the resident if it provides knee space. And keep in mind that work surfaces are not required by the Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines.
Right. Thank you so much for that answer, Eric. Our next question comes from Craig, and the question is, oh, this is a very involved question. So while the FHA does not apply to the location of controls or operating mechanisms on appliances, federal courts have ruled that designers have control over where an appliance is installed or mounted. In other words, to comply with the FHA, a microwave must be located such that the controls on the microwave are within an accessible reach range. Please specify this issue in a manner that does not simply rest on the FHA statement regarding operating mechanisms and controls on appliances that are not within the enforceability of the FHA. All right, Eric.
Again, unfortunately, I have to refer back to the Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines that they do not require that appliances such as microwaves and exhaust fans be located within accessible reach ranges. Kitchens having range hood fan controls that exceed reach range requirements still comply with the Fair Housing Act. Now, we only make statements in reference to compliance with the Fair Housing Act. Other accessibility standards, again, such as the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Uniform Federal Accessibility Standards, may have requirements for appliances such as microwaves and or refrigerators and controls at range hoods. And that's a separate issue, and that has to meet the compliance with the specific federal standard that is applicable.
Right. Thank you again for that very involved response to a very involved question. And our next question is from Eric. Older codes seem to provide some guidance on the reach limitations due to the arc of the arm reach from front to side, thus reducing the reach diagonally. The FADM has language regarding locating outlets and switches 36 inches from the corner. Does that also suggest the outlet or switch should be located 12 inches from a wall or refrigerator that prevents a wheelchair from getting closer? Eric?
The Fair Housing Act Design Manual illustrates the 30-inch by 48-inch clear floor space in reference to the location of switches and outlets. The Fair Housing Act Design Manual specifically has a diagram that indicates switches and outlets should be installed at 36 inches from kitchen corners. What the Fair Housing Act Design Manual does not contain is diagrams illustrating the arc of the swing for the reach ranges, but certainly these diagrams that are used by other standards are a great point of reference. Refrigerators and ovens may project beyond standard kitchen cabinets, encroaching the clear floor space to reach the outlets. Designers and builders are encouraged to consider the projection of these appliances when locating switches and outlets so the operable parts are within the 25-inch maximum reach over the obstruction. And also keep in mind that there are multiple safe harbors that can be chosen to comply with the Fair Housing Act, and they will also vary in these requirements.
Thank you again. I think we have time for maybe two more quick questions. So we have another question from April. On the U-shaped kitchen, a CFS was not shown at the dishwasher. Is that not a requirement in kitchens? Or the following slide is saying the overlap from the sink is allowed for access to the dishwasher. So I think she wants some clarification on that, Eric.
Sure. So the Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines only require a 60-inch turning space in U-shaped kitchens that have a range sink or cooktop at its base. And all these U-shaped kitchens also require the 30-inch by 48-inch clear floor space at all appliances, including the dishwasher. Certain kitchen configurations facilitate placing the 30-inch by 48-inch clear floor space for the dishwasher adjacent to the dishwasher, allowing the resident to lower the dishwasher door and retrieve the dishes in the open position.
We have time for one other question. Craig would like to know, the slide illustrating FS at narrow U-shaped kitchens indicates 40 inches clearance. However, a 60-inch diameter turning space is required. Can you clarify, please, Eric?
Sure. So the Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines require the 60-inch turning space, as we mentioned, in a U-shaped kitchen that has a range sink or cooktop at its base. However, there is an exception. If the kitchen has a sink or cooktop with knee space underneath it, the guidelines allow reducing the space to 40 inches between opposing cabinets, counters, appliances, and walls.
Thank you so much for those answers to those very involved questions. And again, thank the attendees for those questions. And now at this time, we are going to go through our knowledge checks. And so, all right, knowledge check 1. The FHA applies to all new multifamily buildings with 4 or more dwelling units built for occupancy after March 13th, 1991. The answer to that is true. That is a true statement, and 95% of you got that correct. Great job. Knowledge check 2. The two approaches used with CFS in usable kitchens are the parallel approach and the perpendicular approach. That statement is true, and 98% of you got that correct. Yay. Knowledge check 3. Space to execute a parallel approach must be provided at ranges, cooktops, and sinks unless knee space is provided. Again, knee is the word that's going to correctly fill in that blank, and 96% of you got that correct. That's fantastic. Knowledge check 4, excuse me. It is recommended that the controls of at least one wall-mounted oven should be within the reach range of a seated person. That statement is true, and 97% of you got that right. That is so good. It's actually great. Now, knowledge check 5. Appliance depths, excluding door handles, must be included when calculating the 40-inch clearances. That is true, and 90% of you got that correct. That's good. Really good work. All right, knowledge check 6. A 60-inch diameter turning circle is required in a U-shaped kitchen with a sink, range, or cooktop at its base. And everyone got that correct. 100%. Yay, yay, yay. That is so. And knowledge check 7. A U-shaped kitchen must be arranged so there is a 30 by 48-inch CFS for a parallel approach centered on the sink, range, or cooktop. And again, everyone got that correct, 100%. I'm so excited. I shouldn't be that excited, but I am. All right. And knowledge check 8. Under the FHA, it is recommended that the bottoms of cooktops, sink supply lines, and drain pipes be insulated or enclosed. And only 61% of you got that correct, but that's okay. Now you know what the correct answer is. Under the FHA, that is a recommendation, but it is a strong recommendation. All right. And knowledge check 9. Stefan is designing a walk-in pantry that must be entered to reach the stored items. He should design for a doorway that provides a 32-inch nominal clear opening. And 89% of you got that correct. That is fantastic. And last but not least, knowledge check 10, the guidelines permit the installation of stacked washers and dryers. And 85% of you knew that that was correct. So, good job. Good job. All right. So now let's move ahead. Let's talk about certificates and we'll wrap up so that you can go back to whatever you need to do for the rest of your day. So, for attending at least 45 minutes of today's presentation, you will receive an attendance certificate. If you attended for less than 45 minutes, you will not receive an attendance certificate. The attendance certificate will be sent to you on Wednesday, tomorrow. If you do not receive the attendance certificate by Thursday morning, check your junk or your spam email. If it's not there, let us know. Email us at fairhousingfirst@hud.gov, and we will make sure that you get your attendance certificate. Now, if you take the final quiz and pass the quiz, which I'm quite sure everyone will, you will receive a passing certificate. The quiz will be in the email that comes to participants 2 hours after the end of the webinar, and it was also in the reminder email that was sent to you before the webinar began. Quizzes may be taken at any time following this training event, and certificates of passing are issued when a passing score of 80% or better is achieved. If you don't receive your pass quiz certificate by Friday evening, check your junk or your spam email. If it's not there, email us at fairhousingfirst@hud.gov and we will make sure that you receive your passing quiz certificate. Now, last bit of housekeeping, training evaluation. At the end of this training, there is a training event survey for you to complete. We, in advance, appreciate your responses and support in improving our training products. And contacts. Please contact us with further questions via the DCRC by calling 888-341-7781. And that number is accessible by voice and teletypewriter, or feel free to contact us via email at fairhousingfirst@hud.gov. You can also scan the QR code on the screen to add the DCRC's contact info to your cell phone's address book. So as we close, we would like to thank our presenters, our technical support, our ASL interpreters, and of course, you, the attendees. This screen will remain up for 20 seconds after the broadcast to allow you time to scan the QR code or screenshot the contact information on your screen. Again, we thank all of you that have attended today. We hope that you will join us for our next scheduled training, and we hope that you have a fantastically accessible day.